Hello everyone. I should say there's a strange comfort in knowing that even if you wanted to leave this presentation, it's much more difficult now. So my name is Adam Donnelly. I belong to English for Academic Study, which is part of the School of Modern Languages and Cultures. I'm going to tell you about some scholarship work that I've been doing on seminar discussion behaviours, and it's kind of grown to include issues around inclusivity and intercultural communication, and hopefully it might be an additional layer to some of the previous talks on group work and cross-cultural interaction. I'll start just by giving some basic background about my field in EAP and speaking more generally in the university. I'll talk about how I came to the project, I'll tell you what I did and how I did it, and then give you an idea of some of the main findings and possible implications as I see them going forward. Maybe just as a starter for 10, a question for you to set the scene. How long would be a tolerable period of silence in a group discussion for you before awkwardness set in? 1 to 2 seconds? 3 to 4? 6 to 10 seconds or more? The reason I ask is because there is a little bit of research on this which suggests that Spanish and English speakers tend to have lower tolerance of threshold for silence in interaction compared to, for example, Japanese speakers, for whom a silence of maybe 10 seconds or more to consider and formulate and process a response might be perfectly normal. So it's not all that difficult to imagine how a discussion involving a diverse range of speakers might lead to some challenges regarding sort of expectations about the progress of the discussion. A slightly more rhetorical question: how easy do you find it to challenge the ideas of people that you don't know very well in a discussion? Probably not very easy. In a second or other language? Probably harder still. And finally, have you ever observed or participated in a mixed nationality discussion that seemed to be less than successful? I'm going to guess yes. I think often we instinctively know when a discussion isn't quite going to plan, but maybe it's less easy to identify why that's happening. So hopefully I'm going to try and cover some of these ideas today. Just in terms of my background, my field of practice is English for academic purposes, which is basically a branch of English language teaching which is concerned with learning and teaching in English medium academic settings. Very broadly speaking, we deliver a range of pre-sessional and in-sessional English language provision, pre-sessional being preparatory courses before students join their academic programs, in-sessional is support alongside academic study, and we work almost exclusively with international students. So it kind of feels as though we're in a position in the university that's at the front line of internationalisation. And it's worth kind of reminding about the extent of that internationalisation, which was touched on in the previous presentation. Last year, around 500,000 HE students in the UK from overseas. A clear majority of full-time postgrad students are from overseas, and in every year since 2012, the number of students from China alone has exceeded all EU countries combined. So in many ways, higher education, EAP, is an ideal location for intercultural research. My interest is specifically in speaking in the academy, not least because it's a core component of learning and teaching in higher education. It's a means by which students can develop an understanding and express their subject matter. It's arguably the principal means by which students explore and co-construct knowledge. It's an important means of academic socialisation, how students are exposed to and practice the type of communicative skills deemed to be necessary for success in the academy. And although, as we've heard, speaking may actually be an assessed component of student study experience, particularly formative assessment, it's still relatively under-researched, certainly compared to academic writing. I'm focusing today specifically on seminars, again because they're a really established part of the student learning experience. They're seen to perform a range of important functions: socialisation, increasing content retention, enhancing criticality. It's probably worth kind of trying to pin down that label of seminar because it can denote different things in different contexts. Essentially here I'm talking about a discussion that revolves around pre-selected readings. It might involve an oral presentation from one or more students that ideally would then develop into a more open, free-flowing discussion, question and answer. session. This may or maybe more or less tutor-led, depending on the level and the context. And of course, there's disciplinary variations. So for example, we do a lot of work with the Adam Smith Business School, and the typical format, particularly at postgraduate level, is more problem-solving based, case studies, and applying learning to post-study professional contexts. Now, importantly, the key point underpinning the seminar event is this implicit expectation for complex forms of discussion and interaction, where speakers will co-construct meaning and that new knowledge will emerge through the discussion. Okay? And there's been some interesting research to distinguish between simple and complex forms of discussion. The former being more like a series of pre-formed ideas, kind of mini presentations. The complex discussion being the more valued form, where students interact and meaning emerges as a result of the discussion. And I've certainly, going back to one of those previous questions, often felt that the discussions that appear to be less successful are the ones that feel more like a series of mini presentations, where a student presents everything they've read about the topic. There's a couple of questions, and then it moves on to the next person, and it never really reaches that stage of kind of open and spontaneous discussion. Now, within the research on seminars, one of the key factors is the identification of disagreement as an important feature in realizing complex discussions. That in order for knowledge to be co-constructed, that essentially speakers need to disagree with each other to force the discussion into extended areas, new territories that may otherwise have been unrealized or undiscovered. So implicitly, when we're asked to participate in a seminar discussion, we're actually being asked to challenge each other, to disagree, to refute, to debate. And these realities are embedded within our graduate attributes at the university. So even just a kind of cursory glance, you'll see some of these key ideas about expressing, articulating complex ideas, challenging assumptions, constructing meaning in a critical fashion. And if we also accept that the sort of widely held view that the norms around appropriate forms of expressing disagreement and challenging speakers varies widely across cultures, then it feels as though there's something of a crossroads between the seminars as an important component of higher education pedagogy, and then this kind of implicit expectation that speakers from diverse cultural backgrounds will just get together in a room and they'll readily disagree with each other in the co-construction of knowledge. So I was keen to kind of explore this crossroads, this intersection a little bit more by trying to kind of answer some fairly modest research questions. When and to what extent does disagreement occur in discussions between international students on an EAP course? What strategies are employed by these speakers to manage disagreement in interaction? And what role, if any, does disagreement play in the co-construction of knowledge? Now, it's worth kind of looking a little bit at the theoretical background to some of these areas. So the research was heavily informed by Politeness Theory, which was first proposed by Brown and Levinson in the 70s, which essentially holds that all speakers will exhibit innate concerns for polite forms of interaction and saving face, both our own and the people that we're speaking to, and that these concerns govern the way that people interact with each other. And from that view, then disagreement is seen as one of a range of face-threatening acts that potentially can disrupt that interpersonal harmony, and that therefore speakers will employ different face-saving strategies to try and mitigate the impact of face-threatening acts like disagreement. Now, critically again, within politeness theory, there is a recognition that the way that face is perceived and the limits of personal territories vary widely across cultures. Maybe coming back to that 6 to 10 seconds of silence question. And that word culture is important because it's much more dynamic than just nationality. There's a cultural variability approach to intercultural communication, which holds that any individual or any group will exhibit discussion behaviours somewhere on an individualist to collectivist spectrum. Individualism being more direct, dominating, self-interest behaviours, collectivism being more concerned with the interests of the group. So in the broadest sense, individualism characterised by high-risk behaviours, direct, dominating forms of speech. The frequently cited examples are the kind of typical Western model of academic discourse, quite combative and challenging and debate-driven, while collectivism is more low-risk, speaking circumspectly or tactfully, or actually avoiding the kind of inherent risk that's built up in acts like disagreement. Of course, we should be careful not to make broad generalisations about whole communities or communicative cultures, but rather to recognise that any individual can and will exhibit more or less individualist or collectivist discussion behaviours based on a range of different factors at the time. And to recognise that interaction and seminar discussion behaviours are highly situated and context-dependent events. There's a whole range of factors at play when speakers gather together and interact in a discussion, including the personality traits of the speakers, the perception of the rapport that exists between the group. For international students, second language anxiety can be a huge factor. It might also be cultural norms and these politeness imperatives that exist that are implicit and often not at the surface. But that said, there is compelling evidence about the impact of discussion behaviours on student learning experiences. So some research from Nakane was looking at Japanese students in Australian universities, highlighting that the perfectly legitimate use of silence as a face-saving tactic or discussion behaviour was negatively evaluated by peers, but also by lecturers. It's highlighting that direct link between discussion behaviours and not only student experiences, but potentially also student outcomes. And there is a growing body of research to show that disagreement's not only necessary, but actually beneficial in a range of communicative contexts, such as tasks involving problem solving, decision making, of which academic seminar discussions are undeniably one. So, I undertook a small, modest kind of case study project, which is looking at the seminar discussion behaviours of 11 pre-sessional EEP students, representing 5 nationalities. From that group, I was able to arrange and analyse 3 30-minute seminar discussions that were based on existing in-house EEP materials that we use as part of our syllabus. The seminar groups were arranged with a view to maintaining an element of sort of cultural variability, and also with a recognition of the importance of relational histories. So students, where possible, were grouped together with people that they knew, essentially. And the analysis was heavily informed by conversation analysis, which might be painfully dull, but is essentially a form of discourse analysis which looks at the sequential organisation of spoken turns and how discussion develops over the course of an interaction. And I was specifically interested in instances involving disagreement and whether or not this was related to the co-construction of knowledge in a discussion. Thank you. It's going well. If you'll indulge me for a minute, this may be your idea of hell, but this is essentially what I was doing for a couple of months. It's a linguist's dream and a normal person's nightmare, maybe. But this is a sample of a transcript from one of the discussions, including speakers from Saudi Arabia, Indonesia, and China. And essentially what I was doing was going line by line, looking for instances where disagreement occurred as a face-threatening act, and the impact that had on the progression of the discussion, pushing the discussion into extended areas that potentially would have been left undiscovered or unrealised, towards a kind of hallowed ground or a holy grail where co-constructed knowledge emerges. That was 2 months of my life going through transcripts like this. If this is your cup of tea, I'd be delighted to talk to you about it. If not, I won't take it personally. So, just in terms of a summary of some of the main findings, it was abundantly clear from the analysis of the speech data that expression of disagreement is absolutely integral to the realization of co-constructed knowledge in interaction, as it forces the discussion into new territories and new areas of conversation. And that conversely, there appear to be frequent missed opportunities where perhaps more low-risk, avoidance-based discussion strategies failed to produce co-constructed knowledge and more complex forms of interaction. That speakers unconsciously collaborate in group management and rapport management within a discussion, and that paradoxically, kind of an acknowledgement of that group rapport can actually prevent students from taking those risks that will develop a discussion into the more complex territories. And crucially, that speakers whose tendency was towards more low-risk, obliging, avoidance-based strategies, such as silence, appear to be excluded from opportunities for more sort of greater realization of co-constructed knowledge. So just in terms of the implications, the sort of next steps as I see them, it goes without saying that culture affects communication in a range of quite profound ways. I think it's important to remember, maybe touching on what Gail said this morning, that when we ask students to participate in seminar discussions or just in group work of any type, we're actually asking them to undertake a considerable communicative task. And that built within that task is this implicit expectation that students will challenge and refute and debate and essentially disagree with each other in the pursuit of complex knowledge, complex exchanges and enhanced knowledge building. I think we have to recognise the particular challenges faced by international students who are often operating not only in another language but also in another communicative value system, and maybe cut them some slack if it's possible to say that. And that we should, I think we do this anyway, but place real importance on group rapport and rapport management and the relational dynamics that exist within any group work or seminar kind of speech event. I believe that we do this instinctively as L&T practitioners, but it's something really to bear in mind. And to have that sort of awareness of the link between socio-cultural norms and the potential for negative stereotypes. And that inadvertently we may end up creating exclusive learning environments when in fact what we want to aim for, of course, is more inclusivity. For me, in terms of the next steps, I realise I'm not presenting you with a range of handy takeaway strategies and resources, but for me it's kind of step one of a longer process, looking at the different approaches to seminar discussions across different disciplinary contexts. This was very EAP specific, looking exclusively at international students and pre-sessional as well, so students who hadn't yet joined their academic programs. And looking for perhaps a range of views, interpretations of how seminar discussion teaching and pedagogy is approached across the university. So if anyone has thoughts, ideas, opinions on those, I'd be very much delighted to hear them. So thank you very much.